Hello everyone, this is Jean Dirici from the team Talai presenting to you about improving soil health with cover crops. I put together this presentation with my colleague Mr. Tamás Molnár, and we would like to give you a brief introduction about what we are doing with cover crops, how we are using it, and what kinds of experiments we are conducting to get to know this technology better. We are working with cover crops since 2015. We started working with the iconic tillage radish as our first cover crop, and then we started adding newer species, and now we are working with 40 plus species and 30-35 custom mixes on an annual basis. Our focus area is Hungary. Approximately we are overlooking at 15,000 hectares. But we are working with Serbian, Slovakian, Romanian and Croatian farmers as well. In this presentation we would like to talk about a very good way for testing two-way combinations on one plot, almost 200 combinations on a single plot. We'd like to talk about technology that's not that popular at the moment, but has beneficial effects. It is using double cover crops before the spring crop. We would like to talk about terminating cereal rye before sunflower with different termination dates, and then we would like to introduce an experiment where we compared the different mix properties and effects on the soil health. This testing the two-way mixes concept came from France, from Mr. Frédéric Thomas. It was the basic idea was to seed 4-meter wide rows of each species with a half seeding rate in an orthogonal grid. So we would then get, if we are testing 20 species, you would get 20 by 20, so 400 plots, where 20 plots would be the same species being mixed with itself, so giving us the full seeding rate, and then we would have 190 combinations of two-way mixes repeated twice. We have done this twice. The first one was done in last August in 2019 with the autumn species, and then there is one more experiment in progress. This is the summer species matrix, and this is now still running. It was seeded on 24th July in 2020. We are using a small plot with sandy soil with a lower pH, and we are seeding everything at 3 centimeters depth. This is what the summer matrix looks like. We call it matrix seeding. This is what the summer matrix looks like at the moment. We are still evaluating this one. For the autumn mix, for the autumn matrix from last year, we have used the following 20 species. We have used all kinds of large seeded legumes like beans and lupins, peas. We have used oats and rye. We have used flax, different species of vetch, clovers, and of course smaller seeded species like phacelia, radishes and mustards as well. What we have learned from it is that it's a very good way for comparing different species, different relative species. So this is like on the left-hand side of the farmer, you can see the tillage radish, and on the right-hand side you can see the oilseed radish. So you can do the different structure of the leaves and of course of the roots as well. This is on the here's the white mustard, and here's the Abyssinian mustard. You can see the difference in the above-ground biomass, its structure, and you can see of course the different root systems as well. This is the difference between the black oats, Avena strigosa, and the common oats, Avena sativa. Of course, there is some small difference in the size of the biomass, but what's more important is that the common oats was more susceptible for rusting and other problems, while the black oats was more tolerant against rusting. What we have also seen is that when you mix common oats with a legume, and the legume does not produce a good stand. Like here, the fava beans had some problems, so you can see it was very scattered in this plot. When the fava beans has some problems, the oats were still suffering from the rust or from nutrient deficiency. While here, where the lupin produced a very good biome above ground and root biomass at the same time, you can see that the oats is also healthier. Here you can see the difference in Tamás's hand. This is the oats without the lupin, and this is the oats with the lupin. You can see the health and the strength and the size of the plant as well. I really recommend you trying this technology on your own farm or with your farmers. It's very easy. It's like takes a whole day for the seeding, but with a well configured grain drill, it can be very easily done. Double cover cropping is what we call a full regenerative technology. So you have like winter wheat, after you have a summer cover crop, and you have an autumn cover crop like this farmer in Slovakia had, and then you have a summer crop like sunflower. This was very interesting for us to see. Of course, the cost per hectare are higher than if you have only one cover crop, but in the end, it showed that you only needed 300 kilograms of pelletized chicken manure as a starter and only needed a half dose of Pulsar. So that was the nutrient and the plant protection strategy for this whole sunflower planted in the spring of 2020. You can see here the winter wheat in 2019, the winter wheat stubble. There was no cultivation, just direct drilling, the Sudan grass and buckwheat mix, letting them grow and then terminating them with a small dose of glyphosate, and then direct drilling the next mix, the fava beans, lentils, peas and flax autumn mix into it at the end of August, beginning of September, letting it grow until the next spring, where some of it was terminated by the frost, but the rest was terminated with a urea ammonium nitrate solution and some glyphosate. Of course, glyphosate is not the only method for terminating cover crops. I will elaborate that matter at the end of this presentation. So we are still waiting here for the end result, but it shows a very good stand of sunflower. So we're expecting 3+ tons per hectare for this technology. Terminating cereal rye before sunflower is a big question. When should we terminate our winter hardy mix? We seeded a two-way mix of winter peas and cereal rye late October 2019. It germinated and grew pretty well, and then it was terminated in 3 passes in March and April 2020. You can see that the first plot was terminated 18 days before planting with spraying with glyphosate, and the second plot was terminated 11 days before planting, and the last plot was terminated 4 days before planting, and then the date of the sunflower planting was 8th of April 2020. Of course, the rest of the field around the experiment were shallow disced on the day of the planting, so the disc went through the field, and then came the planter with the sunflower. You can see how the experiment looked like. It was very interesting. This was the first kind of experiment in Hungary about on this topic. What we have seen on the first days of the sunflower germinating is that the sunflower germinated with more vigor, and different pesticides. The pesticides did not hurt the sunflower that much. Here you can see the pesticide damage on the plot where it was disced, and here you can see the plot where the cereal rye was terminated last, so only 4 days before the planting. So we can tell that the residue really helped the plant to have more vigor and to be more healthy in the first weeks of the growing season. Of course, at the end, however, it showed us that the best results were with the termination. 18 days before the planting, it gave us 4.3 tons per hectare. But of course, outside the experiment, the rest of the field, which was disced as well on the day of the planting, gave us almost 4.5 tons per hectare. And of course, the worst results came from the the April 4th termination, so the termination which was only done 4 days before the sunflower planting. So we are still working on the conclusions to get to know that why the earlier termination were better. It looks like that with the earlier termination, the post-emergent herbicide control was also more effective, because the April 4th termination had the biggest problems with the weed pressure. You can watch our experiment on YouTube, of course, and we are also creating a document about it, explaining the different effects and reasons that can be behind the yield difference. You may want to ask that, based on our experience, what are the best cover crops for the different purposes of the farmers? Let's just talk about maximum biomass production, which of course also brings, I would say, which also brings the best weed suppression results as well. So for summer seeded cover crop, in our experience, for summer seeded cover crop mix sorghum or Sudan grass, or the hybrid of sorghum Sudan grass, Niger seed, sun hemp, in Latin Crotalaria juncea, and pearl millet would be the best components for maximizing biomass production. For late summer or early autumn seeded mixes, I would say that the black oats, the Avenus trigosa, would be one of the best component to add to a cover crop mix. You can see this is the sorghum Sudan grass, what it looks like this summer in 2020, where we got plenty of moisture and we got heat at the same time. So Sudan grass components in the mixes grew 2 meters tall, so this is a lot of biomass. This is very good weed suppression. This is the Crotalaria juncea, the sun hemp, which is also a nitrogen fixing plant, but you need to inoculate the seeds in order to make the rhizobium strains work. This could also grow like 1.52 meters high if seeded at the right time and gets enough moisture and heat. And this is a field of black oats seeded in the middle of August, and it also the picture was taken at the end of October. So just in 45 or 50 days, this can have a massive ground cover, which will then be frost killed during the winter, and you will have a nice mulch in the next spring. For nitrogen fixation, I would say the best crops are the fava beans, the peas. Chickling vetch is also performing very well on all soils. Vetches, hairy vetch, common vetch works well. In summer mixes, the lab beans or the cowpeas could work also well, along with the aforementioned sun hemp. And on the very sandy and acidic soils, the lupins, either the white or the blue flower lupins, can be a good choice. This is the common vetch. How does it look? Looks like it has some very fine roots, and it's also capable of nitrogen fixation. I would say fava beans is one of the best nitrogen fixing plant on the soils where we work with the farmers. You can see the size. It's the size of the root nodules here compared to a coin. For baking soil compaction, which is also very much sold by the farmers, I would say that of course the best would be the tillage radish, the oilseed radish, but also the different kind of mustards is good. And Phacelia and flax has finer roots, but they are also capable of breaking the soil compaction and making the soil structure better. This is on the left side. You can see a tillage radish. On the right side, just next to it, in this mix, you can see an oilseed radish deep in the soil. This is what the Abyssinian mustard looks like. Above ground, it also has a very pronounced root. I would say even deeper going and compaction buster root is a deeper going compaction buster root than the white mustard has. Of course, it comes at a more expensive price, and this is the root structure of a flax or linseed, which is also very much favored by the mycorrhizal fungi. And this is what the Phacelia looks like. It's also very good for flowering, for pollinators. It also has some very fine root hairs, which can also help you make your future seedbed better. We regularly evaluate cover crop mixes. Every year we have some kind of experiment on that one. Our last experiment was when we seeded 4 mixes at the same time: a nitrogen fixing mix, a biomass mix, a subsoiling mix, and a low growing mix. We took soil samples, plant samples, and also made a microbiological analysis. On next spring, it was an autumn mix, seeded middle of August after wheat, before corn. And then you can see here the different compositions of the nitrogen fixing mix on 3 legumes. The biomass mix has ryegrass and black oats in it. The subsoiling has Abyssinian mustard and black oats as well in it. And the low growing mix, which was more suitable for an orchard or for a vineyard, but we wanted to try it out here, as Abyssinian mustard, clover, and the vetch in it. This is what the fava beans mix look like in October, in the beginning of December. Here you can see it in middle of February, and you can see it middle of March. In mid-March we made we took the microbiological samples as well. You can see that the micronutrient content of the cover crops. This field was sampled on first days of December. You can see the blue columns are the nitrogen, the red columns are the phosphorus, and the green columns are the potassium. You can see the differences. Of course, the nitrogen fixing mix has the highest content of nitrogen, this is for sure, but potassium and phosphorus are somewhat alike. We have also tested a number of bacteria from the samples we took in March. We also had a tilt control on the other side of the road, and you can see that of course all the 4 cover crop samples are higher than the control sample in terms of number of bacteria, and also we have the higher numbers for all the mixes than the tilt control for the length of the mycorrhizal hyphae. Of course, you can see that the one mix that overwintered a bit, the vetch, clover, and Abyssinian mustard mixes, these survived, at least the clover and the vetch, the winter. So here we have, in spring, here we have the highest result for the length of the mycorrhizal hyphae. For the termination methods, I would like to elaborate on this one a bit. We have done several experiments and also some field shows. Here you can see one of our field show from the spring of 2019, where we use different type of cultivators, subsoilers, and roller crimpers and discs for terminating a frost-killed cover crop in central Hungary. You can watch our video about the whole field day and this experiment. But it looked like that the one where we used only the roller crimper, all we direct drilled the corn, that I would say that gave the best results with the least amount of work. Of course, we have the different termination methods like the roller crimping or the mowing, or of course the incorporation of the cover crops with a disc or with a cultivator in the spring at the same time. It all depends on the farmer and the goals of the farmer, and of course the stand of the cover crop, what we would like to achieve. All of these has their advantages and disadvantages. Of course, one of our favorites is when you are integrating all the 5 of the soil health principles, and you are using animals to graze your cover crops. And here you can see fava beans, black oats, and tillage radish mix before the grazing and after the grazing. That's also a good termination method without any kind of herbicide. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us and ask your questions. You can see our websites, domains, and mobile number here. I hope that we will be able to help you with any question if it comes regarding to your cover crop mix or your cover crop species selection. If you have any questions, just ask. Thank you very much for your attention again. Bye bye.